Ladies and gentlemen, there comes a moment in every person's life when they must decide whether they will continue to explain their worth or begin to live it. Silence is not the absence of voice, it is the presence of understanding. When you choose silence, you are not surrendering. You are stepping into a higher level of authority over your emotions, your reactions, and your destiny. Silence is often misunderstood because the world has trained people to equate noise with power and constant expression with confidence. Yet true strength is not measured by how loudly someone speaks, how quickly they react, or how fiercely they defend themselves in every situation. Real strength is revealed in restraint. It is revealed in the ability to pause when emotions are pushing for an immediate response. Silence is controlled strength because it requires discipline, self-awareness, and emotional intelligence. Anyone can shout, argue, or retaliate, but not everyone can stand firm without explaining themselves. That ability comes from inner security, not outer approval. When a person chooses silence, they are not surrendering their voice, they are choosing the moment in which their voice will matter most. Reaction is easy, but reflection is rare. Silence creates space between stimulus and response, and in that space wisdom is formed. Without silence, people become prisoners of impulse. They say things they later regret. They damage relationships they later wish to repair, and they reveal emotions that others may misuse. Silence, therefore, is not about hiding feelings. It is about managing them so they do not control you. It is the practice of leadership over one's inner world before attempting to influence the outer world. Controlled strength through silence also communicates self-respect. When someone refuses to engage in unnecessary conflict, they are sending a clear message. Their peace is more valuable than winning an argument. This is not avoidance, it is prioritization. There is a significant difference between running away from confrontation and rising above it. Running away is driven by fear, but rising above is driven by clarity. The silent individual is not weak, they are focused. They understand that not every invitation deserves attendance, and not every opinion deserves a response. By remaining silent in moments of provocation, they conserve energy for goals that truly matter. Silence is also educational because it teaches others how to approach you. People observe what you tolerate and what you ignore. When you respond to every insult, you train others to continue provoking you. When you remain composed and selective in your responses, you establish boundaries without needing to announce them. Your behavior becomes your statement. In this way, silence becomes a form of communication more powerful than words because it is backed by action and consistency. Words can be doubted, but disciplined behavior builds credibility over time. Another dimension of controlled silence is emotional maturity. Emotional maturity does not mean the absence of feeling. It means the presence of understanding. A mature person recognizes that emotions are temporary waves, not permanent truths. Silence allows those waves to settle before decisions are made. It prevents temporary anger from creating permanent consequences. Many conflicts escalate, not because the problem is large, but because reactions are immediate. Silence slows the pace of conflict and introduces the possibility of resolution. It gives room for logic to stand beside emotion rather than be drowned by it. Silence also strengthens personal identity. In a world filled with constant comparison, commentary, and criticism, silence becomes a sanctuary where individuals reconnect with their own values. When you are always responding to external voices, you begin to lose awareness of your internal voice. Controlled silence restores that awareness. It allows a person to evaluate their direction, their purpose, and their priorities without interference. This internal alignment produces confidence that does not depend on applause. Such confidence is stable because it is rooted in self-knowledge rather than external validation. Furthermore, silence protects dignity. Dignity is not only about how others treat you. It is also about how you treat yourself under pressure. When you refuse to engage in behavior that contradicts your values, you preserve your integrity. Silence becomes a shield that guards your character. It prevents you from being dragged into situations that diminish your standards. Over time, people begin to associate you with composure and reliability because you do not fluctuate with every emotional wind. This reputation is not built overnight. It is constructed through repeated choices of restraint. Controlled silence also has strategic value. Leaders, thinkers, and innovators throughout history have understood that observation often produces better outcomes than constant speech. When you listen more than you speak, you gather information others freely reveal. Silence sharpens perception. It allows you to understand motives, patterns, and intentions that would otherwise be missed. In this sense, silence is not passive, it is active awareness. It transforms you from a reactor into a strategist, from a participant in chaos into an architect of direction. Ultimately, silence as controlled strength is about mastery, mastery of emotion, energy, and expression. It is not the absence of courage, but its refinement. It is the understanding that power does not need constant display to remain powerful. Just as a calm ocean holds immense depth beneath its surface, a silent individual can hold immense strength within their character. Silence is not emptiness, it is fullness under control. It is the decision to let actions speak when words would only echo. And in that disciplined quietness, a person discovers that strength is not proven by how much noise they can make, but by how much peace they can maintain while the world around them demands reaction. Silence is often misunderstood because the world has trained people to equate noise with power and reaction with courage. Yet true strength is rarely loud. True strength is controlled, intentional, and disciplined. When a person chooses silence after being hurt, dismissed, or undervalued, it is not a surrender of voice, it is the elevation of awareness. It is the realization that not every battle deserves energy, not every misunderstanding deserves explanation, and not every relationship deserves continued access. Silence becomes strength when it is chosen from clarity rather than fear. It is the ability to stand firm internally without needing external validation. Many people speak to be heard, but the strong learn when not to speak because they already understand their worth. Silence, in this sense, is not emptiness, it is fullness. It is emotional maturity in action. Controlled silence requires discipline because the natural human instinct is to defend, to explain, and to correct every wrong perception. However, constant defense can drain identity and weaken confidence. When someone develops the strength to remain silent, they are not ignoring reality, they are choosing peace over chaos. They are deciding that their emotional energy is too valuable to be spent on endless cycles of justification. This control transforms silence into a shield rather than a wound. It protects the mind from unnecessary conflict and protects the heart from repeated disappointment. A person who masters silence learns to observe more, understand more, and react less. They stop allowing external behavior to dictate internal stability. This is not passivity, it is leadership over one's emotions. Silence, when guided by wisdom, becomes a declaration that self-respect no longer negotiates with disrespect. Walking away is another principle that many misunderstand because society often labels departure as weakness or avoidance. In truth, walking away can be the highest demonstration of self-respect. It is the recognition that not all environments deserve your presence and not all relationships deserve your effort. Remaining where you are constantly diminished slowly erodes confidence and clarity. Walking away interrupts that erosion. It is not about running from difficulty. It is about refusing to remain where growth is impossible. Self-respect is not pride, it is awareness of personal value. When a person walks away calmly, without revenge or drama, they communicate a powerful message: my peace is not for sale, and my identity is not dependent on your approval. The act of walking away also teaches an internal lesson. It reinforces the understanding that dignity must be protected intentionally. Many people wait for permission to choose themselves, but self-respect does not require consensus. It requires courage. Courage is not always loud or confrontational. Sometimes it is quiet and decisive. Walking away demands emotional strength because it often involves leaving familiarity, leaving comfort, and sometimes leaving people you once cared about deeply. Yet growth frequently begins at the edge of discomfort. When you step away from situations that consistently undermine your worth, you create space for healthier connections and clearer thinking. The absence you create in unhealthy spaces becomes the room you need for personal expansion. There is also an educational dimension to walking away. It teaches others how you expect to be treated without saying a single word. Boundaries are rarely effective when they are only spoken. They become powerful when they are demonstrated. Walking away is a boundary in motion. It shows that access to your time, energy, and presence is a privilege, not an entitlement. This lesson is not delivered through confrontation, but through consistency. When you repeatedly choose environments that align with your values, you train both yourself and others to recognize your standards. Self-respect becomes visible through action rather than explanation. Both silence and walking away share a common foundation: self-mastery. They require awareness of emotional triggers and the discipline to respond thoughtfully instead of reacting impulsively. A person who can remain silent when provoked and can walk away when disrespected possesses a rare form of strength. This strength is not about dominance over others. It is about governance over oneself. Such individuals do not allow temporary emotions to make permanent decisions. They pause, evaluate, and then act with intention. Over time, This approach builds inner stability, and inner stability attracts healthier relationships, clearer opportunities, and stronger self-confidence. Ultimately, silence and walking away are not tools of avoidance. They are instruments of alignment. They align actions with values and emotions with purpose. They remind a person that their worth does not decrease because someone failed to recognize it. When practiced with wisdom, these choices transform pain into clarity and confusion into direction. They allow a person to move forward without bitterness and to grow without needing applause. In a world that constantly encourages reaction, choosing silence and choosing to walk away become acts of profound intelligence. They are not signs of defeat. They are evidence of self-respect, emotional discipline, and the quiet confidence that comes from truly knowing who you are. Silence is often misunderstood because the world has trained people to associate noise with strength and response with power. Yet the deepest form of strength is the ability to restrain your reaction when your emotions are demanding expression. When you choose silence, you are not surrendering your voice. You are refining it. You are deciding that not every situation deserves your energy, not every misunderstanding deserves your explanation, and not every person deserves continued access to your thoughts. This kind of silence is not emptiness, it is discipline. It is the emotional maturity that recognizes that reacting impulsively may satisfy the moment, but can damage the future. In silence, you observe more clearly, you think more deeply, and you act more wisely. You learn that power is not proven by how loudly you can defend yourself, but by how calmly you can maintain your composure. Silence becomes a shield that protects your peace and a filter that prevents unnecessary conflict from entering your life. It teaches patience, and patience sharpens perception. When you are silent by choice, you are demonstrating that your inner stability is stronger than external provocation. This controlled quietness is not passive, it is intentional. It is the ability to step back from emotional storms and refuse to be carried away by them. Through silence, you begin to realize that your value does not decrease when you stop explaining yourself. Instead, it increases because you are no longer negotiating your worth with people who failed to recognize it in the first place. Silence becomes a language of self-respect, communicating boundaries without hostility and confidence without arrogance. It is strength that does not need applause because it is rooted in self-awareness rather than public validation. Walking away is another form of strength that many people fear because it requires courage without immediate reward. It demands that you release familiarity even when uncertainty lies ahead. Walking away is not an act of defeat, it is an act of decision. It is the moment you recognize that remaining in a situation that diminishes you is more harmful than stepping into the unknown. This choice reflects self-respect at its highest level because it places your well-being above temporary comfort. Many stay where they are tolerated because they fear loneliness, criticism, or change. But walking away teaches you that discomfort is often the doorway to growth. It forces you to confront your own fears and dismantle the belief that your identity is tied to a specific person, place, or relationship. When you walk away with dignity rather than drama, you demonstrate inner authority. You are saying, without speaking, that your standards are not negotiable. This movement is educational because it shows you the difference between attachment and alignment. Attachment keeps you bound to what is familiar. Alignment leads you toward what is healthy. Walking away becomes a lesson in self-trust. You begin to understand that your intuition is a guide, not an enemy. You realize that you do not need permission to protect your peace. The act itself builds resilience, because every step forward reinforces the truth that you can survive change and even thrive within it. Walking away is not about abandoning others. It is about refusing to abandon yourself. It is a declaration that your presence is valuable and that you will not offer it where it is ignored or disrespected. Your absence, more than your presence, has the power to teach lessons that words cannot convey. When you are constantly available, your value can become invisible. Not because you lack importance, but because familiarity often breeds complacency. Absence interrupts that cycle. It removes the convenience that others may have taken for granted and replaces it with reflection. In your absence, people are confronted with the space you once filled, the encouragement you provided, the understanding you offered, the stability you represented. This space becomes a classroom where realization occurs naturally rather than being forced through confrontation. Absence allows truth to surface without argument. It gives others the opportunity to evaluate their behavior without your influence softening the consequences. More importantly, it gives you the opportunity to rediscover yourself outside the roles you once played. You begin to notice how much energy you invested, and how much of yourself you may have neglected. This realization is transformative because it shifts your focus from being needed to being fulfilled. Absence teaches boundaries more effectively than repeated warnings ever could. It demonstrates that access to you is a privilege, not an entitlement. Through absence, you also learn that you are complete on your own. You see that your identity is not dependent on constant interaction or approval. This lesson strengthens independence and deepens self-confidence. Absence is not about punishment. It is about perspective. It clarifies priorities, reveals character, and encourages growth on both sides. When you allow your absence to speak, you give life the chance to deliver lessons that emotions alone could never articulate. Emotional discipline is the ability to remain in control of your inner world when everything around you tries to pull you into chaos. It is not the absence of feelings, because feelings are natural and necessary, but it is the mastery over how those feelings direct your actions. Many people believe strength is measured by how loudly they respond, how quickly they defend themselves, or how fiercely they react when hurt. In reality, strength is measured by how well you can pause, think, and choose a response that protects your future instead of satisfying a temporary emotion. Emotional discipline is the invisible shield that guards your peace, your reputation, and your direction in life. When someone hurts you, the immediate reaction is often to prove a point, to send a message, or to show them what they lost. Yet these reactions usually come from wounded pride rather than wisdom. Emotional discipline teaches you that not every feeling deserves an action, and not every situation deserves your energy. It reminds you that a moment of anger can destroy years of progress, while a moment of restraint can secure years of stability. The person who learns to control their emotions is not suppressing themselves, they are refining themselves. They are deciding that their future is more important than their impulse. Protecting your future requires understanding that emotions are powerful, but temporary, while consequences are lasting. A harsh message, a public argument, or a desperate attempt to be heard might feel relieving in the moment, but those actions can create long-term regret. Emotional discipline allows you to step back and ask, will this decision still make sense tomorrow? Will this action align with the person I am becoming? This pause is not weakness. It is wisdom in motion. It is the difference between reacting like a victim of circumstances and responding like the architect of your destiny. There is also a deep educational value in emotional discipline because it shapes how others perceive and treat you. People learn how to interact with you based on your reactions. If every situation pulls you into emotional turbulence, others begin to associate you with instability. But when you remain calm and composed, even in challenging moments, you create an environment of respect around yourself. You teach people that access to you requires maturity, and interaction with you requires consideration. Your calmness becomes a boundary that words alone could never establish. Emotional discipline is not about becoming cold or distant. It is about becoming clear. It means you still care, but you care wisely. You still feel, but you feel without losing direction. It is the balance between heart and mind, where compassion exists without self, betrayal and kindness exists without self-neglect. This clarity protects your future because it prevents you from making decisions based on loneliness, fear, or the need for validation. Instead, you begin to act from confidence, purpose, and self-respect. Another powerful aspect of emotional discipline is that it preserves your energy. Emotional outbursts are exhausting. Constantly replaying conversations, defending yourself, or seeking closure from people who cannot provide it drains the very strength you need to grow. Discipline redirects that energy inward. It shifts your focus from trying to change others to improving yourself. You begin investing time in learning, building skills, strengthening character, and nurturing peace. Over time, this internal investment produces visible results, stability, confidence, and resilience that no external situation can easily shake. In the long run, emotional discipline becomes a form of leadership over your own life. A person who cannot lead their emotions will struggle to lead their decisions, relationships, or ambitions. But when you master your internal responses, you become less influenced by temporary storms and more guided by long-term vision. You stop asking, how do I prove myself? And start asking, how do I improve myself? This shift changes everything. It moves you from a cycle of reaction to a path of intentional growth. Protecting your future is not only about financial planning or career goals, it is equally about emotional intelligence. The relationships you maintain, the opportunities you attract, and the peace you experience are all influenced by how well you manage your emotions. Emotional discipline ensures that your past wounds do not dictate your present actions or your future direction. It allows you to walk away when necessary, remain silent when beneficial, and speak when purposeful. Ultimately, emotional discipline is a lifelong practice, not a single decision. It is built through awareness, reflection, and consistent effort. Each time you choose patience over anger, clarity over confusion, and purpose over pride, you strengthen this discipline. And as it grows, so does your ability to navigate life with grace and confidence. Your future becomes safer not because challenges disappear, but because you become stronger than the forces trying to distract or derail you. Silence is often misunderstood because the world has trained people to believe that strength must always be visible and audible. Yet the deepest strength is frequently quiet, controlled, and intentional. When a person chooses silence after being hurt, ignored, or undervalued, it is not surrender. It is mastery over impulse. It means they have risen above the need to react immediately or emotionally. This kind of silence is not born from fear, but from clarity. It reflects the realization that not every battle deserves energy, and not every misunderstanding deserves explanation. In educational terms, silence becomes a discipline of emotional intelligence. It teaches the individual how to pause, evaluate, and respond with wisdom rather than instinct. Over time, this discipline transforms character. Instead of being controlled by external behavior, the person becomes governed by internal principles. That is true authority, the ability to remain calm when chaos expects a reaction. Silence then becomes a language of self, respect, and a declaration that one's peace is more valuable than temporary satisfaction. Walking away is another concept that society often labels as defeat, when in reality it can be the highest demonstration of self-respect. There is profound maturity in recognizing when a situation no longer contributes to growth, dignity, or emotional safety. Many individuals remain trapped in unhealthy cycles because they fear being misunderstood or judged. However, the decision to walk away is not about seeking approval. It is about honoring personal worth. Educationally, this action teaches boundaries, invisible lines that protect mental and emotional well-being. Boundaries are not walls built to keep people out. They are guidelines that teach others how to treat you. When someone walks away peacefully, they are not abandoning responsibility. They are choosing alignment with purpose. They understand that staying in a destructive environment only delays progress and erodes confidence. The act of leaving without hostility sends a powerful message. I value myself enough to choose growth over familiarity. Over time, this decision builds resilience, independence, and clarity of direction, which are essential qualities for long-term success and fulfillment. Another important lesson is that absence can become a greater teacher than presence ever was. When you are constantly available, people often overlook the value you bring because consistency can be mistaken for permanence. However, once that presence is withdrawn, reality shifts. Absence creates space for reflection, and reflection leads to understanding. This is not manipulation, it is a natural psychological process. Human beings frequently recognize importance through contrast. When support, encouragement, or loyalty is no longer present, individuals begin to evaluate the role those qualities once played in their lives. From an educational standpoint, absence becomes a mirror. It reveals patterns, behaviors, and dependencies that were previously hidden by routine. The person who chooses silence and distance is not trying to cause pain, they are allowing truth to surface naturally. In this space, both parties gain awareness. One learns the value of what was lost, and the other learns the power of self-preservation. Absence, therefore, is not emptiness. It is a classroom where realization becomes the teacher and experience becomes the lesson. Emotional discipline is another cornerstone of personal evolution. It is easy to express anger, frustration, or disappointment in moments of conflict, but it takes exceptional strength to regulate those emotions and channel them productively. Emotional discipline is not suppression, it is management. It involves acknowledging feelings without allowing them to dictate behavior. This skill is educational because it trains the mind to prioritize long-term outcomes over short-term reactions. When individuals master their emotions, they gain control over decisions, relationships, and personal direction. Instead of being driven by momentary impulses, they begin to act according to values and goals. This discipline fosters patience, clarity, and self-confidence. It also protects mental health by reducing unnecessary stress and regret. In relationships and life choices alike, emotional discipline becomes a compass that guides actions toward constructive solutions rather than destructive responses. Over time, this mastery creates stability and respect, both internally and externally. Finally, growth truly begins when the need for constant validation ends. Many people spend years seeking approval from others, believing that external recognition defines their worth. However, genuine development starts when self-acceptance replaces external dependence. Validation from others is temporary and inconsistent, but self-validation is stable and enduring. This shift marks a turning point in personal education because it changes motivation. Instead of striving to impress, the individual begins striving to improve. Goals become personal rather than performative. Confidence becomes rooted in identity rather than opinion. When someone no longer requires applause to continue progressing, they unlock freedom, the freedom to explore potential without fear of criticism or rejection. This internal transformation leads to authentic growth, stronger decision-making, and a deeper sense of fulfillment. The silence that once seemed like an ending becomes the foundation for a new beginning. Where purpose speaks louder than praise and progress replaces permission. Silence is often misunderstood because people associate it with defeat, fear, or weakness. In reality, silence can be one of the most powerful forms of strength a person can possess. When you choose silence after being hurt, ignored, or disrespected, you are not giving up your voice. You are choosing not to waste it. There is a difference between being unable to speak and deciding that speaking is no longer necessary. The first comes from insecurity, but the second comes from confidence. Silence becomes strength when it is guided by awareness and emotional control. It is the ability to pause instead of reacting, to observe instead of exploding, and to protect your peace instead of defending your ego. This kind of silence is not passive. It is active discipline. It shows that you have reached a level of maturity where you no longer need to prove your worth through arguments or endless explanations. You understand that not every situation deserves your energy, and not every person deserves access to your thoughts. In this state, silence becomes a shield that guards your focus and a tool that allows wisdom to speak louder than noise ever could. Walking away is another form of silent power that many people struggle to understand. Society often teaches individuals to hold on, to fight for every relationship, and to never give up. While perseverance has value, there is also wisdom in knowing when to release what is draining your spirit. Walking away does not always mean failure. Sometimes it is the highest expression of self-respect. It is the moment you recognize that your dignity is more important than temporary comfort. Remaining in a situation where you are constantly undervalued slowly erodes confidence and clarity. Choosing to walk away interrupts that erosion and allows you to rebuild yourself in a healthier environment. It requires courage because it means stepping into uncertainty, but it also opens the door to growth. When you walk away without hostility, without revenge, and without drama, you demonstrate emotional intelligence. You show that your standards are not negotiable and that your presence is a privilege, not an obligation. This action teaches others that access to you is earned through respect, not demanded through familiarity. Your absence can communicate lessons that your presence never could. When you are always available, always forgiving, and always explaining, people may begin to take you for granted. Human nature sometimes fails to appreciate consistency until it is removed. Absence creates space for reflection. It removes distraction and forces individuals to confront the reality of what they lost. This is not about punishing anyone. It is about allowing truth to surface naturally. When your presence is constant, its value can become invisible. But when it is gone, the contrast becomes undeniable. Absence shifts perception. It encourages introspection and reveals patterns that were previously ignored. This is why silence paired with distance can be such a powerful teacher. It allows consequences to unfold without confrontation. It transforms emotional chaos into quiet clarity. Through absence, you give others the opportunity to evaluate their actions without pressure, and you give yourself the opportunity to heal without interference. Emotional discipline is the foundation that makes all of these actions possible. Without discipline, silence becomes suppression, walking away becomes avoidance, and absence becomes bitterness. Emotional discipline is not about ignoring feelings. It is about understanding and directing them. It is the skill of feeling anger without becoming destructive, feeling sadness without becoming hopeless, and feeling disappointment without losing self-worth. This discipline protects your future because it prevents temporary emotions from making permanent decisions. It allows you to respond thoughtfully instead of reacting impulsively. When you master emotional discipline, you begin to see challenges as lessons instead of personal attacks. You realize that every difficult interaction is an opportunity to strengthen patience, empathy, and resilience. This inner control creates stability in your life, and stability leads to better choices, healthier relationships, and clearer goals. A disciplined mind becomes a safe place for you to live, regardless of external circumstances. Another profound truth is that value is often recognized only after it is withdrawn. Familiarity can blur appreciation. When people grow accustomed to your kindness, support, or loyalty, they may stop acknowledging its importance. This does not mean your value decreases. It simply means perception becomes clouded. Withdrawal restores clarity. When what was once constant becomes absent, the mind begins to measure what it lost. This realization is not something you force. It is something that happens naturally when you stop overextending yourself. The key is to withdraw with grace rather than resentment. Bitterness diminishes the lesson, but dignity amplifies it. When you step back calmly, you allow your worth to speak for itself. You no longer chase recognition because you understand that true value does not need advertisement. It becomes evident through contrast, through memory, and through the undeniable impact of your absence. Finally, growth truly begins when the need for validation ends. Many people spend years seeking approval from others, believing that acceptance defines their worth. This pursuit can become exhausting because external validation is unpredictable and often temporary. When you release the need to be constantly understood or praised, you reclaim your independence. You start making decisions based on purpose instead of popularity. This shift transforms silence into confidence, walking away into liberation, and absence into renewal. You no longer measure your progress by how others respond. You measure it by how aligned you are with your values. Growth becomes internal rather than external. You begin to invest energy in developing skills, strengthening character, and expanding perspective instead of defending reputation. In this stage, peace replaces anxiety, clarity replaces confusion, and direction replaces doubt. You understand that your journey is personal and that your worth is inherent, not conditional. When validation is no longer your motivation, evolution becomes your lifestyle, and silence becomes the language of your strength. Silence is often misunderstood because the world trains people to believe that strength must always be visible, loud, and constantly defended. Yet the most powerful form of strength is frequently invisible. When a person chooses silence after being hurt, dismissed, or undervalued, they are not giving up, they are gaining control. Silence is the decision to stop participating in cycles that drain energy and dignity. It is emotional intelligence in action. Instead of reacting impulsively, silence allows clarity to take the lead. It becomes a shield that protects peace, a boundary that prevents further harm, and a statement that says, "I value myself enough to withdraw from what diminishes me." In this way, silence is not empty, it is full of purpose, intention, and self-respect. Walking away is rarely easy, yet it is one of the highest demonstrations of personal worth. Many people remain in situations where they are not appreciated because they fear loneliness, judgment, or uncertainty. However, choosing to walk away teaches the mind and the heart a powerful lesson: your presence is a privilege, not an obligation. When you step back from environments or relationships that consistently ignore your value, you are not abandoning connection, you are choosing alignment with your inner truth. Walking away is an act of courage because it requires faith in your own future rather than dependence on familiar pain. It signals maturity, self-awareness, and the understanding that peace is more valuable than temporary comfort. There is a profound truth in the idea that absence can educate where presence could not. When you are constantly available, constantly forgiving, and constantly explaining yourself, others may never fully grasp your significance. Familiarity can blur appreciation, but when your presence is removed, reality becomes undeniable. The silence you leave behind forces reflection. It creates space for people to confront their own actions, words, and choices without distraction. Absence does not scream, it echoes. It allows lessons to unfold naturally rather than being imposed. In this way, your withdrawal becomes a teacher, not through anger or revenge, but through quiet consequence. The lesson is not about punishment, it is about awareness. Emotional discipline is one of the most valuable skills a person can develop because it determines direction more than talent or intelligence ever will. When emotions control decisions, life becomes reactive and chaotic. But when discipline leads, emotions become tools rather than obstacles. Choosing silence instead of confrontation, reflection instead of retaliation, and growth instead of bitterness transforms pain into wisdom. Emotional discipline does not mean suppressing feelings. It means understanding them without letting them dominate your behavior. It is the ability to feel deeply while acting wisely. This discipline protects your future because it prevents temporary emotions from creating permanent damage. It keeps your focus aligned with purpose rather than distraction. Value is often invisible to those who have constant access to it. Humans have a natural tendency to overlook what is always available, assuming it will never disappear. When you withdraw your energy, attention, and support, the void you leave reveals your worth more clearly than words ever could. This realization does not come from manipulation, it comes from natural consequence. When something meaningful is no longer present, its impact becomes measurable. People begin to understand not only what they lost, but what they failed to nurture. This is why self-worth must never be dependent on external validation. Your value exists whether it is recognized or not, but its recognition often arrives when your presence is no longer taken for granted. Revenge is often portrayed as strength, yet true strength lies in transcendence. When purpose becomes greater than pain, the desire for retaliation fades. Revenge keeps you emotionally tied to the very situation you are trying to escape. It prolongs suffering and anchors your energy to the past. Purpose, on the other hand, pulls you forward. It redirects attention toward goals, growth, and personal development. When you invest your time in building a better future, rather than proving a point, you elevate yourself beyond the conflict. This shift transforms hurt into fuel. You stop asking how to respond to others and start asking how to improve yourself. That is where real victory exists, not in defeating someone else, but in mastering your own direction. Growth begins the moment validation is no longer the driving force behind your actions. As long as approval is the goal, freedom remains limited. You become dependent on opinions, reactions, and acceptance. But when you release the need for constant recognition, a new level of independence emerges. You begin to make decisions based on alignment rather than applause. This transition is where transformation occurs. You start pursuing excellence because it fulfills you, not because it impresses others. You learn to trust your inner voice more than external noise. In this space, silence becomes fertile ground for self-discovery. Without the distraction of seeking validation, you hear your own thoughts more clearly, understand your own desires more deeply, and move forward with greater confidence. Growth is not loud, it is steady, intentional, and deeply personal. Silence is often misunderstood because the world trains people to equate noise with strength and constant expression with confidence. Yet silence, when chosen intentionally, is one of the most powerful demonstrations of emotional intelligence a person can practice. It is not the silence of fear, nor the silence of defeat. It is the silence of control. When you decide not to respond to disrespect, not to chase explanations, and not to argue for your worth, you are exercising authority over your inner world. This kind of silence is strength in its most refined form because it shows that your emotions serve you rather than rule you. It is the moment you stop giving others the remote control to your peace and begin governing your own reactions with wisdom and discipline. Walking away is another action that many mistake for surrender, when in reality it is often the highest level of self-respect. To walk away does not mean you lack love or patience. It means you possess clarity. It means you understand that your dignity has boundaries and your energy has limits. Every human being has a finite supply of emotional resources, and maturity is learning where to invest them. When you walk away from situations that continuously drain, belittle, or confuse you, you are not abandoning the relationship. You are preserving your identity. You are making a declaration to yourself that your mental and emotional well-being are not negotiable commodities. This decision becomes a turning point because it shifts your focus from trying to change others to strengthening yourself. Your absence can teach lessons your presence never could because familiarity often blinds people to value. When you are constantly available, constantly forgiving, and constantly understanding, others may begin to treat your loyalty as a guarantee rather than a gift. Absence interrupts that illusion. It removes comfort and exposes reality. Without your guidance, your encouragement, or your reliability, individuals are forced to confront the consequences of their actions. The lesson is not delivered through confrontation or argument. It is delivered through experience. And experience is the most effective teacher because it cannot be debated or ignored. In your absence, reflection begins and awareness grows where denial once lived. Emotional discipline is the shield that protects your future from the damage of temporary feelings. Many people sabotage their own progress because they allow momentary anger, hurt, or pride to dictate permanent decisions. Discipline over emotions does not mean suppressing them. It means understanding them without becoming enslaved by them. When you choose silence instead of retaliation, composure instead of chaos, and patience instead of impulsiveness, you are building a foundation for long-term stability. This discipline ensures that your future is not shaped by reactions to past wounds, but by intentional steps toward growth. It is a sign of inner leadership, the ability to guide yourself even when emotions are loud. Value is often recognized only after it is withdrawn because human nature tends to overlook what is consistently present. People rarely measure the importance of something until they experience life without it. When you remove your presence, your support, or your loyalty, you create a contrast that reveals your true worth. This realization is not something you need to force or announce. It unfolds naturally. Your silence becomes a mirror in which others see what they once took for granted. The recognition that follows is not created by your persuasion, but by their awareness. An awareness born from absence is usually deeper and more lasting. You do not need revenge when your purpose is greater than your pain. Revenge keeps you emotionally tied to the very situation you are trying to escape. Purpose, on the other hand, liberates you. When your focus shifts from proving someone wrong to building something meaningful, you reclaim your power. Purpose redirects energy from destruction to creation, from bitterness to vision. It reminds you that your life is too significant to be reduced to emotional battles that yield no progress. By choosing growth over retaliation, you demonstrate wisdom, and wisdom always outlives temporary victories. Growth begins where validation ends because dependence on approval limits personal evolution. When you rely on others to confirm your worth, you surrender control of your confidence. True development occurs when you learn to validate yourself through progress, character, and consistency. Silence helps cultivate this independence because it forces you to listen inward instead of outward. You begin to measure success by your standards rather than public opinion. This internal shift is transformative as it builds resilience and clarity, allowing you to move forward without constantly seeking reassurance. Losing access to you is a consequence, not a punishment. This distinction is important because it changes your mindset from emotional reaction to rational decision. You are not removing yourself to cause suffering. You are removing yourself to protect peace. Consequences are natural outcomes of behavior, not acts of revenge. When someone loses the privilege of your presence, it is not cruelty, it is accountability. You are simply acknowledging that relationships must be mutual in respect and effort. This understanding frees you from guilt and reinforces the truth that protecting your well-being is not selfish, it is necessary for a healthy and purposeful life. Let them wonder, let them reflect, let them learn. Your responsibility is not to be remembered. Your responsibility is to become greater.